Benny Hill pushed open the bakery door with a cheerful shove, balancing a modest parcel under one arm as the warm scent of fresh bread greeted him like an old friend. The place hummed with activity, bakers shouting orders and customers jostling for fresh loaves. He spotted the counter and made his way forward, humming a silly little tune that matched the rhythm of his steps. A quick turn to dodge a passing tray proved his undoing. His foot caught the edge of a flour sack left carelessly on the floor, sending a white cloud bursting upward like a miniature snowstorm. Benny flailed, the parcel flying from his hands and landing squarely in a mixing bowl that spun wildly out of control. Dough began to ooze over the sides in sticky ropes, slapping against the nearest customer's apron with a wet thud. The woman yelped and slipped backward, her arms windmilling as she grabbed at a rack of cooling pastries. Croissants tumbled like dominoes, scattering across the tiles. Benny tried to steady her, but only succeeded in bumping a second sack, which split open and coated three more patrons in a fine layer of powder. Coughs erupted everywhere, turning the bustling shop into a foggy battlefield of waving arms and sliding feet. One baker lunged for the runaway mixer, but the machine had other ideas. It whirred louder, flinging globs of dough like misguided snowballs. A glob landed on Benny's head, giving him an instant white wig that drew a ripple of startled laughter from the crowd, before another slip sent him skidding into a stack of empty trays. Metal clattered and echoed, drawing more customers into the fray as they dodged the flying debris. Flour dusted every surface now, turning the floor into a slippery rink. A stout man chasing his dropped hat collided with Benny, and together they spun in a clumsy circle before crashing into a display of cakes. Icing smeared across jackets and faces alike, creating a rainbow of accidental war paint. Benny wiped at his eyes, only to spread more flour across his cheeks, and offered a sheepish grin that somehow made the whole mess funnier. The chaos peaked when the delivery parcel finally burst under a rolling pin, releasing a puff of spice that tickled noses and sent everyone into fresh sneezes. Customers stumbled toward the exit in a disorganized clump, leaving trails of dough footprints behind them. Benny staggered upright at last, brushing himself off with little success, and watched the bakery settle into a quiet, flour-coated calm. He tipped an imaginary hat to the dazed staff and stepped back into the street, leaving a faint white trail with every stride. Benny stepped onto the pavement with flour still dusting his shoulders like fresh snow, and before he could catch his breath, a flustered nurse pushing a pram shouted something about a missing patient. He glanced back, saw the bakery staff waving brooms, and decided the park across the road looked like the perfect shortcut to disappear. His legs carried him through the iron gates at a brisk trot that quickly turned into a full sprint when two policemen rounded the corner, whistles blasting. Benny dodged a group of picnickers, sending a blanket and a scattering of sandwiches into the air. One constable slipped on a slice of ham and went down in a tangle of limbs, while the other kept coming. Ahead, a park keeper was trimming a hedge with enormous shears. Benny swerved, tripped over a loose shoelace, and rolled straight into a fountain. Water sprayed in a glittering arc, soaking an elderly gentleman who had been feeding the ducks. The ducks took off in a flapping panic, one landing squarely on the park keeper's hat. Benny clambered out dripping, offered a soggy salute, and dashed onward. Nurses appeared from every path, some pushing wheelchairs, others waving thermometers like tiny swords. Benny weaved between them, accidentally tipping a basket of apples that rolled under the feet of the pursuing constables. One officer performed an impressive slide and collided with a bench, sending a chessboard and its players flying in opposite directions. A brass band struck up near the bandstand just as Benny sprinted past. He grabbed a trombone slide mid-note and used it to vault over a low railing, leaving the musician honking in surprise. Park-goers scattered, some laughing, others joining the chase out of sheer curiosity. A small dog took up the cause, barking happily at Benny's heels while its owner shouted apologies. The path narrowed beside a line of deck chairs. Benny hurdled the first two, but caught his foot on the third and tumbled into a flower bed. Petals exploded around him. He popped up wearing a daisy crown, waved to the cheering onlookers, and kept running. The policemen were gaining, one of them now sporting a pigeon on his helmet. At the far gate, Benny spotted an ice cream cart. He snatched a cone, tossed coins he didn't have time to count, and flung the treat backward as a distraction. The nearest constable caught it full in the face. Benny burst through the gate, leaving a trail of flour, water, and laughter behind him as the park settled into glorious, rumbling chaos. Benny dashed straight from the park gates and through the revolving doors of the Grand Imperial Hotel, his coat flapping like a torn sail. The lobby hummed with quiet chatter until a porter mistook him for the new night manager and thrust a clipboard into his hands. Benny nodded, scribbled nonsense, and hurried toward the lift before anyone could ask questions. A stack of monogrammed suitcases sat waiting by the desk. One wheel had already broken free, and the rest began to roll as if they had minds of their own. Benny lunged to stop them, but his foot caught a trailing strap. The luggage train picked up speed, bumping down the corridor and scattering guests like startled pigeons. A dowager in pearls yelped as her hat box sailed past her ankles. In the dining room, a waiter balanced a tray of trifle. Benny burst through the swing doors, slipped on a patch of spilled sauce, and slid the full length of the polished floor. He grabbed the nearest tablecloth to steady himself, pulling silverware and soup bowls after him in a clattering wake. Diners ducked as flying spoons whistled overhead. Somewhere a string quartet kept playing, the violinist dodging a runaway briefcase without missing a note. Upstairs, a honeymoon couple opened their door just as Benny careered past. They saw only a blur in a flour-dusted coat and assumed room service had arrived with unusual flair. The wife called after him to leave the champagne on ice. Benny, still running, tossed her an imaginary bottle and kept going. The constables from the park finally caught up in the lobby. They charged the lift just as its doors closed on Benny and 3 loose trunks. The car lurched, groaned, then stopped between floors. Benny pried the hatch open, climbed onto the roof, and found a service ladder that led to the rooftop garden. Below him, the city lights winked. Behind him, the luggage kept tumbling down stairwells and corridors, creating fresh crashes at every landing. He sprinted across the rooftop, vaulted a row of deck chairs, and spotted the fire escape at the far corner. One last mad dash carried him down the metal steps 2 at a time, coat streaming, shoes clanging like bells. At street level, he burst onto the pavement, turned sharply left, and vanished into the night traffic just as the first constable reached the alley mouth. The hotel behind him settled into a chorus of distant shouts and rolling wheels.